let's begin. So, tonight we're talking about the three minds. So last week, for those of us who weren't here, was about the three brains. Completely different topic. Yeah, I know there's three and that they sort of seem similar, but it's not the same thing. Yeah. So the first thing we have to explain to you is that the brain and the mind not the same thing. In standard, I guess the way we're all raised when you go to school and all that sort of stuff. Or I say school. People say school, don't they? Got a different. I'm from Adelaide. School. Anyway, pool. But yeah, so we're raised to think that the brain and the mind are the same thing, but this is completely incorrect. Yeah, the mind uses the brain as a receiving point, but the mind actually exists free. We have a mental body, in fact. Yeah. Or we can create a mental body if we don't have one. It's an important part of Gnosis. We have our physical body, like that. We have our vital body that sort of just is connected to the physical body. They can't be separated, yeah? If you remove it, the person would die. So we got a physical body, we got our vital body. We got an astral body, which usually sits within the physical body, and when we go out in our astral body. And then we also have our mental body. And the mind communicates through the brain. The brain receives, it's like a receiver, yeah? Like the brain is like that, receiving the information from the mind and then putting it back out again. But the brain and the mind are not the same thing. It's very important. The mind can expand itself to the size of a universe if it wants to study the universe. And the mind can shrink itself to the size of an atom to study an atom. That's why it's quite interesting that you will find... like yogi sages with amazing knowledge of science, despite the fact there's no way that they could have physically, in any way, shape or form, have achieved that knowledge. Do you understand what I mean? Like, for instance, the word atom was not coined by scientists. Yeah, the idea of a tiny heavenly body has been around for thousands of years. Yeah, Lucretius talked about it in 3,000 years ago when he wrote his poem talking about the minuscule heavenly bodies that exist within all things. So how do they see these things? How is it that some Indian yogi can have an amazing understanding of astronomy, not just astrology, an amazing understanding of all of the stars, their positions, and things that have required huge devices, knowledge that has required years to get, years of scientific development to physically try and see that, when another man has known it for thousands of years earlier. The same thing, microscopes required to go all the way down into the depths, of something to see it in its smallest way. And yet there have been meditators and awakened men, priests, who have known this sort of thing for centuries, thousands of years. And this, let's not even go into talking about Atlantis, which we'll talk about in later lectures, where they had a level of science that was just so far beyond ours, it makes ours look like a joke. And ours is kind of a joke, actually, if you sort of look at it. Our science is actually quite hilarious. You know what I mean? It just keeps hitting walls. You know what I mean? Basically, the second we put a computer in something, that was the end of it. You know what I mean? Then you just keep putting computers in more things. You put a computer in your fridge, and now you got to watch an ad before you open your fridge. You know what I mean? Like, that's the new Samsung fridge. Watch an ad, open a fridge. You know what I mean? You get a bit of money off. So let's not go there. But the mind is not the brain. They're different things. Yeah, they're completely different. The brain is in the physical body. The mind is an entirely different reality. It exists with less laws. Yeah, it only has 12 laws governing it, as opposed to the brain, which is governed by 48 laws of the physical world. And the brain receives information, concepts, etc., from the mind, and then they are elaborated in the brain, then go back out again. But that's it. So generally speaking, the brain is a receiver. The mind is also a receiver. We're going to go into that in a minute. But the mind is independent from the brain. We can develop the mind beautifully. We can develop the brain only a little bit, and then we die. And then, well, actually, before that, we get old, and the brain starts to fall apart, and then we die. And that's it. So you don't need to develop your brain. You need to develop the mind. So we're going to talk about that. We need to understand the mind. If we want to be able to develop the mind, work with the mind, we have to understand it. So that's the first thing. It's not the brain, completely different, yeah? The signals and things we see in the brain are the activity of the mind. not the brain itself actually doing those things. Okay, so that's been explained. The next thing. We have three minds. The sensorial mind, the intermediate mind, and the inner mind. Yeah? Now, this means each mind is typified or is known by how, because what the mind does is the mind elaborates concept. That's what the mind does. The mind creates concepts out of data that it receives. That's what the mind actually does. Yeah? The mind receives data and then it formulates it into concepts. That's what the function of the mind is. Everything in Gnosis, we explain, has a very specific function. The mind is not there to solve your problems. The mind will never liberate you. You can never use the mind in order to experience. You can experience through the mind something, but generally all of the greatest experiences of joy exist outside the mind. I'm just going to tell you that early. Spoiler alert, right? Developing the mind will only get you so far. Yeah? The best development of the mind is actually, and as I'll talk about, to develop a passive mind that can receive instruction from the consciousness and the being. That's the ideal mind. Not a reactive mind like most people have. A mind that just constantly reacts to the outside world. Your mind is like that. You're walking along and your mind's just like, oh yeah, there's a fat guy walking past. Oh, you can't think that about people. No, he's just like a large man. Don't think that. You shouldn't think that. Oh, you're a horrible person. What am I doing? Bloody hell, I'm hungry. You know what I mean? Jesus, I wonder what he had. He probably knows where good food is. You know what I mean? Oh, God, no, I can't eat though. I can't eat. I've already eaten. I'm not actually hungry. This is ridiculous. Man, it's hot out here. Shit. Far out. The sun's right out, isn't it? Oh, it's going to be a hot summer, isn't it? That's your mind. That's your mind. And that was like slow. Yeah? The mind is just constant. You know, you drive trucks, right? The mind just goes. You know, you're just driving, the mind's just like, ooh. And you're like, what's wrong with you, man? Yeah? It's the mind. Imagine if you separated the mind as a real person, that person would drive you insane. If you had, that's why it's hard having children, because the mind is just starting to develop at a young age, right? They're just starting to learn. My father remembers when I came to him as a kid, I was 3 or 4 or something, and I ran up and said, Dad, I had a thought. And I was like really shocked, like, I had a thought. You're always talking about thoughts in class, Dad. I just had a thought. That was amazing. Yeah, they start, because the mind starts to elaborate. In the beginning, the child just literally is an extension of the parents, and they're just doing everything the parents do. They don't actually think much. It's not till they get older that the mind starts to develop, especially at 7, the mind really starts to develop. They start creating their own concepts about the world, and you're sort of hoping those are going to be good, but it's too late. They've already kind of molded that first 7 years as the real starter, and so you're hoping that they didn't sit in front of too many iPads for 7 years there, you know. But let's not go there, right? So anyway, as I was saying, so the mind elaborates concepts. The mind is all about concepts. That's what the mind is. The mind creates concepts, which just literally means thinking about things. And therefore, what's really important is where the mind gets its information from. This is fundamental. The mind is a receptive entity. The mind is like a sponge, right? It's actually, to be very correct, if you want to go back to really deep sort of elemental theory, like the Chinese 5 element theory and elementals, the 4 humours, which is talked about very strongly in the English tradition as well. Hey, paying attention. Yeah. Then what's going to happen is, right, the mind has the, is like the element water, if you understand. It takes on its environment. Like if you leave a glass of water out in the morning, it tastes terrible because it takes on all its environment. Do you know what I mean? It's like in the movie Signs. Remember that? It's just glasses of water everywhere. No one's ever seen Signs? Wasn't that M. Night Shyamalan? Shyamalan Ding Dong? Mate, it's classic. And old Mel Gibson, he's a national treasure, isn't he? He's a national treasure, you know what I mean? He's got some really interesting views about the world, though. Anyway, continuing on. So, all of that, you know, water has this very receptive nature. In fact, that's a real big problem. That's why a lot of people constantly at the moment are suffering so much about bottled water, because it takes on all the plastic that it's in. Do you know what I mean? Now you've got to have a copper water bottle. That's what Instagram is selling us all, because copper is the only substance in which you can put water and it will actually make it better. Whether this is true or not is actually not the point. What I'm trying to explain to you is that water is receptive. It takes on its environment. Yeah. If you have toxins nearby water, it will suck them straight in. You wash your dishes in water because it removes all of the crap from your dishes and puts it into the water that you should then put down the drain. The mind has this same thing. The mind is like water. And this will be a common theme throughout our explanation tonight, because the mind is like that. Yeah. The mind when it is disturbed is like water. The mind, when it's peaceful and calm, is like water. It can reflect. When disturbed, you can't see. So the mind has this amazing effect. But as I said, the mind takes on its environment very readily and very easily. But how it does that is the difference between the minds. So let's talk about it. The first mind is called the sensorial mind. And like it sounds, it elaborates its concepts, meaning it makes its concepts from data that it receives from the physical 5 senses. Not talking about the internal senses, the chakras, not talking about how the Buddhists say the mind is the 6th sense, because that would mean mind gets its experience only from mind, and that would just be a loop, and that would be problematic, yeah? 5 senses. So this is the first mind. And, you know, more than half humanity is stuck in this mind, yeah? And lives, and their mind functions completely by this. That means everything that I think about the world is only based upon the 5 senses. What I can taste, touch, hear, smell, feel is 100% how all my concepts are formed. You know, understand what I mean? And even if a person tries to have some sort of even if someone were to even look at anything spiritual, they wouldn't be able to understand it, because I only receive data from my 5 senses. If I read a book that tells me about suprasensible things, yeah, meaning things beyond the physical world. If I read a book about things that are about like aliens or something, I go, oh, posh, pish posh, nonsense. What's this rubbish? Because again, I only have the 5 senses. I laugh at people like that. Do you know what I mean? When someone dies, I believe that they just go into the ground and they rot. Now, you don't have to be a scientist to think this way. You can still say, you know, I believe in science, and that's it. And that's fine. But it's not really a belief in science, is it? What it is the mind is completely trapped by the 5 senses. You don't have to be scientific to think that way. I remember a guy, actually, he was probably the most unscientific guy I ever knew. He was a chef I used to work with. And he was like, he got hired through the work for the doll scheme. So you know what I mean, right? He was a rough guy. He was really rough, you know what I mean? Really, he was a nice guy. We got along really well. But he was just so rough. He was so rough. And he came in, and I remember we were talking once, and he asked me, he said, oh, what do you do in your spare time, Mick? And I go, oh, I'm a Gnostic. And what's that? And I go, well, I said, you know, meditation is the beginning, but it's, you know, it's more than that. It's also a whole sort of spiritual movement. And he just looked at me and goes, if I can't touch it, taste it, feel it, or fuck it, because he's a rough guy, he goes, doesn't exist. Do you know what I mean? That was it. And I was like, cool, all right. And we never talked about it ever again. That was it. It was a Harvest Moon. He was the chef at Harvest Moon. And that was it. That was the end of our conversation. We continued our conversations about other things, and we were very good friends. But we never once left the realm of the 5 senses from that point, because there was just no point. He had made his stance extremely clear. Most people live this way. You understand what I mean? Most people are this way. Yeah? And so, and as I said, this is skepticism. Now, skepticism is quite interesting, because people usually say a bit of doubt is actually good. And in Gnosis, we encourage doubt. We actually encourage a person to experience the science on their own, to experience the knowledge on their own. The word Gnosis literally means knowledge, that you gain yourself, that you experience yourself. But it goes deeper. It means knowledge of the unknown. And that's got to do with this last mind. So, so a bit of doubt's good, but skepticism's not. You see, people actually used to be able to see the elementals of nature. If you look, you know, it's interesting that if you read all the mythologies of the world, they have living elementals, living beings within fire, air, earth, and water. Every single mythology, you're talking every single one of them, not just one, not two, every single one of them has some form of fairy, an air elemental, has some form of living of a fire elemental, a jinn, for instance, yeah, has or a salamander, or a voice coming from the flames, and all this sort of stuff. Every single mythology has some form of gnome, dwarf, a dweller of the earth that live within the earth themselves. And they're all explained the same. Every single system has some sort of mermaid or merman or nereid, some sort of explanation of water elementals, creatures and beings that live within the water. And what's interesting about all of these stories is they all correlate. They correlate completely. Yeah, the air elementals are always mischievous. The fire elementals are always intense and often related with spiritual things. The earth elementals are always related with greed and with that sort of intensity and holding on to the earth, you know what I mean? And the water elementals are always seen as usually seen as beautiful and are often seen as leading men astray, men and women, but men usually, because this men are telling stories, right? And so, do you understand what I mean, right? And it's interesting that these stories are all exactly the same everywhere in the world because people used to be able to see the elementals. But in Ireland, they still do. Paddy, he goes down Temple Bar, and he's coming back and he's a little, and he swears he sees a few little men. But what's interesting I make a joke about that, but honestly, I went to Ireland, and when I was in Ireland, there was people who swear to this sort of stuff. They swear that fairies are still real. In Ireland, you're still not allowed to build on a fairy ring. Even though Google has actually taken over a whole suburb. There is a suburb in Dublin that the locals call Google Station, because they took over the train station and then the whole of the suburb, they bought the whole thing and then just gave it to all their workers. So they now own a whole suburb. Someone calls it Google. And even though Google Station is there and Google is building huge stuff, is building everything everywhere, Google is still not allowed to build on a fairy ring. Is not allowed to disturb a small formation of rocks on the ground. Why? Because the people still feel strongly about the fairies and they won't allow it. Yeah? You're still not allowed to disturb a dolmen. Yeah, which is just a small structure of rocks. Okay, they're pretty big bloody rocks, but still. You can't disturb a dolmen because this was a passage into the fourth dimension, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, yeah? The fourth dimension, into the internal worlds where all these elementals not necessarily live, because they live between both, but like we have a vital body, they live within the vital world of all things. The vital elementals, like for instance, all of these elementals are the living elementals of trees, plants, and animals. Their astral bodies are not tied to our body the same way ours are. They're able to move out of their body freely and cavort and spend time. And it's the same thing. You go to Japan, they have elementals, all four, exactly the same. How is this? Because we didn't used to be skeptical. We weren't completely consumed with the five senses. We weren't spending all of our time just looking down at the ground trying to get rare earth metals. Yeah? We weren't spending all of our time trying to get ahead, mate, and get farming, because make more rice, and more rice means more power. More power means more women. That's a bad joke, I'm sorry. But you know what I mean. We weren't doing any of this because the people actually lived happily. But once we started to do that, we became skeptical and we lost our relationship with the fourth dimension. And this is where this mind started to take over. That's why this is the stronger of all three. And so this is skepticism. Skepticism doesn't mean that you're a skeptic. I just... looking for the truth. It means I actually believe in nothing. There's a difference. Not nothing. I believe in the five senses and that's it. I'm completely consumed in the five senses. That's what it really means. And so it doesn't matter. A person could literally show it to you. I remember two of my friends once witnessed a UFO. They were driving home on the M1 really late at night once. And a huge light came down like that. They said they were driving. They were in the Gold Coast. They were driving near Coomera, and a humongous light, giant thing, just came down right in front of the car, and then drove, and then matched their speed for a while, and then just shot off. And he said it was huge and it was massive. They said it was bigger than the car, and it just came down, stopped, and then hovered, and then kept speed with him for a while, and then flew away. And I remember that he talked to his friend. And he was like, wow, that was amazing. You see that? I said, yeah, that was amazing. Wow. And this is, to be fair, this is what actually brought this guy to Gnosis, because he saw this thing. It blew his mind, a completely unexplainable reality, something he could not explain at all. It blew his mind. From then on, he spent hours and hours just staring in the sky, trying to see another one. He started to see them, and he went on sites and he found, is it David Greer? Is that his name?
Yep.
David Greer went into all that sort of stuff, encounters the fifth kind, etc. Really went, and then eventually came to Gnosis. But what's interesting is, he talked to his friend about it, a week later, and he'd spent the whole week just getting into it. He was like, wow, like it blew his mind. Like he said it was so real, so intense. And you know what was interesting? He talked to his friend, and he said to his friend was much more skeptical. His friend is like an Indian guy. He's got a very sort of Indian family. They're all about like making money, you know, that sort of very sort of intense, like materialistic family. Like, you know, you get a good job and then you do this sort of thing. And yeah, they didn't like, you know, his dodgy friends from school who were interested in UFOs. Anyway, so he called his friend and he said, oh, yeah, how you going, man? He's happy. I guess, I've just been looking at these things all week. And he goes, what do you mean? He said, well, that UFO we saw, that was amazing. He said, what are you talking about? I said, the UFO, we saw the UFO. You know, because you've always been telling me that stuff's not real. We saw it. And he goes, oh, you mean that aeroplane, that 2-man aeroplane that just had to make an emergency landing and took off again? And he's like, but didn't make any noise, mate. It made no noise. How could it have been a 2-man? You would have heard a 2-man plane. He goes, no, man, it was just like a 2-man plane just came down, flew off again. And he's like, well, wouldn't that be registered somewhere on the news or something? He's like, no, mate, you know, these things. But the guy, he just wouldn't accept it. And that's the truth. If a person's trapped in this mind, it doesn't matter how many times you show them, they're not going to accept it. That's why, and we're about to talk about the next mind, the religious mind of the intermediate, the mind of belief. That's why you see this constant clash between the somewhat scientifically minded, sensorial mind, and then the religious believer. And you see them just fighting and fighting and fighting. And no one ever gets anywhere. You know, I don't know if you've ever had an argument with a person who's completely just materialistic, 100%. You can't win. They may eventually just sort of get bored and sort of go, oh, okay, mate. You know, yeah. But you're not going to get anywhere. They're just going to do the classic Australian agree until you leave technique. Do you know what I mean, right? So anyway, this is skepticism, materialism, intellectualism. We'll come back to here eventually, talk a bit more about this as we go. But so this is the mind of the senses. So the second mind is the mind of belief, yeah? And so this is the intermediate mind because, and as we'll explain, we do need to get to the interior mind, yeah, which is the inner mind, the mind that actually experiences the consciousness, yeah? We actually do need to start from a base of beliefs. So the intermediate mind elaborates its concepts on data it receives from religious beliefs or religious concepts, yeah? So these are things outside of the 5 senses. I'm not just talking about, I believe that I can fly to the moon and then I work really hard, because that's still physical. It's still based on physical things. You understand what I mean? A physical belief is just the use of the word incorrectly, because you're saying, I believe I can fly. Well, you know, it's not like that. On the other hand, when I read these sorts of books and I start to find religious concepts, yeah, this is the field of belief. So when I read the Bible and I decide that there is this, you know, there was this guy who lived 2,000 years ago, they nailed him to a cross, and so from now on, I can pretty much do whatever I want and then repent at the end of my life and I'm going to go to heaven. Done. Yep. Or I believe in another guy who climbed a fiery ladder to heaven at some point and then rode with God. It was all pretty sick. And I'm going to go with him, and maybe my wife can wear a big blanket. We're all good. Yeah. And all of this comes from its religious belief. And what's interesting about this one is it's all dogma. So it means, a dogma means, so it's different. In Gnosis, we teach a doctrine, which means a set of teachings that we want to experience or understand. A dogma is a teaching that we have to accept and you don't question it. So if the book says that, you know, if the book says Jesus Christ is my savior, here's your savior. That's it. No questions. If I try to say, well, wait a second, how could the world have been made 6,000 years ago, complete with dinosaur bones that can be carbon dated back millions of years? Was that just to test the faithful? Like, do you know what I mean? How can that be? And if you ask that question, everyone says, you know, well, they might just be nice and say, God works in mysterious ways. Yeah? Or they might be upset with you and say, have you even read the book? The book says. What's your problem, mate? The book's right there. Do you know? And some people sort of try and ride the line and sort of try to be, there are a lot of people who are actually a little bit more sensorial, who are kind of got a little bit of intermediate, and they sort of try to ride the line. But the reality is the basis of the way of thinking is still based in religious beliefs, which means I have been given a concept from someone else, from a book. about the unknown, because that's what these are. They are actually concepts of the unknown. The Bible contains real concepts, spiritual experiences of people that are amazing and unexplainable and fantastic and really quite immense. The same with the Quran, the same with the Tao, all this sort of stuff. All of these spiritual things have immense teachings, but to just believe them is not enough, because to believe them without experiencing them creates moralism and fanaticism, because then I haven't actually experienced it. I haven't walked on water myself. I haven't created millions of fish. And this is going to be really cruel. I'm not happy. But it's true. You read about this guy who is just full of joy, you know what I mean? And I'm miserable like all the time. So I'm not living the path of the Christ, am I? Yeah, I'm not living the Christic values. I'm not the Christ. I haven't become that. So thus, therefore, all I can do is believe and then become fanatical, meaning I can then start butting heads with other people who don't believe the same thing that I do, or come from a different mental perspective. That's fanaticism. When you start, you're not experiencing it, so you go around and try to find solidarity in numbers. So you haven't felt it, you're not experiencing it, you're not getting anywhere, so you try and find enough other people who are also not getting anywhere, so you can all form a band and not get anywhere together. At least you feel a little bit better about not getting anywhere, yeah? And then you can also clash with other groups of people who are also not getting anywhere. And that can fulfill the rest of your life. Like, that's it. You never have to question anything ever again. You understand? So, that's harsh, but it's unfortunate and true. Because what we want is the interior mind. The interior mind elaborates its concepts with data that it receives from the consciousness. And this is so important. The consciousness is above the mind. Yeah? The consciousness, if we're looking here at our, this is called the Kabbalah. It's an ancient way of understanding the mysteries. So physical world, physical body. Vital world, vital body. Astral world, astral body. Mental world, that's the mind. Yeah? Then here, this is will, which in us is just lost. I'm not going to go into that right now. And then here, this is the consciousness. This is, see, it's higher up. These are three higher parts of the being, and that is the being, our own interior God. If I want to start experiencing the truth, I want to start to have experiences of the consciousness. I need to experience something higher. The mind on its own can't experience anything. It can't create anything new. That's very important. The mind is a conduit. It receives things, yeah? Like, as an example, even the greatest things ever made with the mind, yeah, still have to come from somewhere. Like, as an example, Harry Potter, that everybody believes is amazing. You know what I mean? It's like the biggest thing, multi-billion-dollar franchise. What is it? It's just a bunch of folklore kind of sticky taped together into a giant mass. That's what it is. We'll throw a werewolf in. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, it's totally different. That's Slavic, but whatever. We'll throw a werewolf in. And what else can we put? Oh, the witches and wizards. But now they're the good guys, not the bad guys. So we'll put them in there. That's kind of semi-Slavic and a little bit Arthurian. I can slot that in there. But I'll make it look really good. I'll slot it together so it looks nice. You know, I give it a fresh coat of paint. And suddenly, it's this amazing story. But everything in it is not new. A guy tried to tell me, one of my English teachers growing up, who was to his credit, an amazing English teacher, taught me so much. Wonderful guy. But this concept, no. He said that Harry Potter, this is in 2005, was the Shakespeare of our day. Oh, no. Saying J.K. Rowling is the Shakespeare of our day. I mean, come on. Shakespeare is the immortal reincarnated Count Saint Germain, the leader of one of the highest in the array of world politics, a mover of everything in our world. Count Saint Germain's an immortal master. That's why a random playwright from the middle of nowhere had an amazing understanding of classical. I mean, back then, you just have to take a moment, right? Just take a moment. How can a guy living in the middle of nowhere with no education write plays like that? Is it not a lot more obvious that a person like Sir Francis Bacon, who lived in the Queen's chambers and had access to books, back then books had to be handwritten. So a book was a pretty big deal. Owning a book was like owning a house. Do you know what I mean? Only lords had books. So if you needed to have the knowledge of, 1,000 books, yeah, at your fingertips, you would have to be either working for a lord or be a lord. Therefore, Shakespeare was Francis Bacon, who was a reincarnation of, well, and not even a reincarnation, it's the immortal master Count Saint-Germain. And that's why he gave us something that was pure and powerful. And the mysteries contained within that are still permeating our society for hundreds of years. You know that pretty much every single boring, banal Hollywood movie is just a rewrite of one of Shakespeare's plays. Ready? All Friends, Seinfeld, everything are just rewrites of Much Ado About Nothing. Every single one of them. They're just literally the term, Much Ado About Nothing. They're just about nothing. We're going to do a show. It's about nothing. Wow, it's amazing. It's about nothing. Yeah, it's about nothing. Yeah? Shakespeare did it first. And the only reason why you know is because you went to bloody super high university and studied Shakespeare. And that's why you know. And that's why you stole his stuff. Yeah? But you see, it's important to understand that, there are these stories that he put out there have been are like within the nature of humanity itself. They're archetypal. They're powerful. Why? Because the man had an awakened consciousness. That's why he can write something that people are still pondering for thousands and thousands of years. The reality is even the newer generations aren't that interested in Harry Potter. The Zoomers, what is it called? The Zoomer generation, or what are they called? Gen Z. Yeah, I'm from the one back millennial. The millennials, they treat Harry Potter like it's a religion. The Zoomers just don't care. They're like, yeah, it's all right. Because it was just pop culture. That was it. It was pop culture. And the next generation, they probably won't even hear about it. Like, yeah, Granddad wants me to read this like random crap about witches and wizards or some shit. But like, I don't know. No, if you go out and look for books, when you go to the bookstore, there's literal actual bins full of Twilight books saying, please take me. And people are just too busy setting them on fire on cold nights. Do you know? And so it's important to understand that the inner mind experiences it can experience the absolute, which is the source of all creation, can experience the unknown, can reflect the consciousness like this. When the mind is clear, when the inner mind is awake, it can reflect the world of consciousness. And this can bring something new into the world. Yeah? These businesses are going to go, yeah, mate, I just waited for my opportunity and I just saw it. And, it just came right there. You know when people, like when you watch documentaries about rich guys? You know what I mean? Like it's the Steve Jobs story. We've done it 3 times. Isn't he an amazing man? Look at that. And he, or like when you watch those ones, it's like, it's a movie about the Beatles or about this. And he walked in there and he said, that's the sound. That's the sound. And I said, yeah, that's the sound. Like I remember, I used to be really into The Prodigy. Don't judge me. I used to be really into The Prodigy when I was a teenager. Yeah? The voodoo, yeah? And I was into that. And I remember when I first saw them on Rage, I thought it was going to change my life. I watched them on Late Night Rage. And they were sitting on the couch, these just idiot Englishmen, and they literally said something like that. He goes, yeah, it's quite interesting when we recorded this one, we were just like on our way to the recording studio. And I said, maybe we should go like, and he's like, that's it, mate. That's it. And so we just did it, it's just amazing. Like, yeah. And it's just so infuriating. It's so infuriating, especially because it's all sampled music anyway. They're just taking... Anyway, it's not good. But you know what I mean? It's just like... But people put these people up on pedestals like they're these amazing... They have brought nothing to society. All these people are forgotten. They're all forgotten. Yeah? All the people in the front row are like, Proddy, what? They don't care. Do you know what I mean? The same thing. In another 20 years, probably no one will even know who the Beatles were. It just doesn't matter. Yeah? But on the same time, everyone knows who Beethoven is. Everyone knows who Bach was. Everyone knows who Mozart is, because these guys had the inner mind awake and they brought something new into the world because they brought something from the unknown. Yeah. And so this is the inner mind getting its concepts from the consciousness itself, inspired concepts. You can't get shit concepts like bogus nonsense concepps from the consciousness. It doesn't work that way. The consciousness is in connection with our own interior being, our interior God. Therefore, we're not going to get nonsense. Yeah, that's why everything's just getting so boring nowadays. It's just all been done before. Every movie is boring. Every new book is boring because it's all been done before. Yeah, and it's just a rehash. So, as we said, to reach the inner mind, there actually does need to be a level of belief. And I said I'd explain it. So, if I want to awaken, because the problem is this mind is closed in humanity. The inner mind is closed. Everyone's mind is shut. Yeah? Most people have already mostly made up their mind about things, meaning they won't change their fundamental way of thinking. I will pursue my interests within the world, if you understand. So I might listen to a guy if he's going to talk about money, but you sort of notice that. You have a conversation with someone and, that most people have already made their mind up and they've sort of shut their mind down to what they're going to be interested in. And if you start moving outside of that, they're just not interested. If you stop talking about money and it's all about money, that's it. As an example, I remember a Gnostic guy in London. He had a good job and he was good at his job. He was working as a computer programmer and he was good at his job. But when he found Gnosis, he gave up drinking, gave up drugs, and that was it. He had to leave the workplace because he wasn't going to the after drinks anymore. And the people just couldn't cope with him anymore because the workplace was so actually worked around that, beers after work was so important for them. Then when he stopped going to beers after work, after I think it was a year, they fired him. They're like, we just can't do it. You just haven't got, there's something wrong. You haven't got the right vibe for the place, mate. Because no one could talk to him anymore. How's the weekend, mate? You get plastered? I said, actually, no, I went on a Vipassana retreat. I was sort of trying something new. I want to try to meditate. And they're like, oh, yeah. Yeah. So you just, what's that? You turned the mind off. Oh, yeah. Did you get that? You can email that work? I gotta go. And that's it, that's it. And you see that all the time, yeah? You can have a simple conversation, how's the weather? You can talk about, what sort of coffee you like. But after a while, so as I said, most people make their mind up. So belief, if I want to actually extend the mind, if I want to actually develop and awaken, because as I said, in humanity, this is closed. Our inner mind is closed. Otherwise, we'd be happy, yeah? So the inner mind is closed. To wake it up, I have to start to develop faith. And this is something interesting, because in society, belief and faith nowadays are sort of considered the same thing. You say to people, people say my faith. I found solace in my faith. But in Gnosis, faith is actually a very demanding word for us, yeah? To believe in something, as I said, just means, as we said, to do something and actually hope that it's going to succeed. That's belief, right? But in Gnosis, belief has to become faith, or it has to be upgraded into faith. Yeah, because faith is something that actually is when belief has actually been settled within us and actually becomes something deeper, but it's settled through experience. This is very important, and through results. So to move belief into faith, as an example, if I want to actually experience like if I came to Gnosis, for instance, and we're teaching something about the astral, James just gave a whole course on the astral. If you want to experience the astral, you need to have at least some belief. Otherwise, there's just no point. Do you know what I mean? If you sit there and you have pure raw skepticism, it's not going to work. If I sit there and go, all right, here's a practice, but I'm not going to silence my mind. Don't even know why I'm here. It's ridiculous. What a waste of time. Then of course, your practice is going to be a waste of time. You have to at least, you know what I mean? There has to be at least some belief it's going to work. Otherwise, there's no point. So you need some belief, yeah? But belief doesn't become your ends, it's your means. So you decide, okay, I'm going to do this practice and I've got an open mind, I'm believing that this can work and I'm going to give it a shot. And maybe have a little bit of doubt, that's fine, but I still believe I'm going to give it a shot, right? That's how it starts. But then when the practice succeeds, we start to get a little bit of faith. And that's how faith is created. If I do a little, say for instance, someone shows me how to pray, which is actually a little bit more complicated. We're actually trying to create like a vibratory affinity between us and our being. If someone shows me how to pray and then I do it, and then I actually have that feeling of the being inside my heart, I now have faith. And that means that the person can come to me and sort of go, oh, all that stuff's ridiculous. But I know, because I've actually experienced it. That experience has taken a belief and made it into something real, faith. It's true inside of me. And you don't even really need to argue with somebody anymore, because when your kids try to argue with something and it's just so obvious, You know, they're like, you know, kids start to get it. They're like, what's a good example? You know, they're trying to. There's like so many, and then when the time comes, you know, like when your kid tells you something, you know, like they know something about the world. You know, like Dad, you know that you know, Dad, the only way to make money is in selling property. You need to sell the house, Dad. Like, I'm not selling the bloody house, Dad. No, Dad, it's the only way. I saw it on the business review. You know, you left the telly on. And, you know, your kids start telling you about it, and this is how it is. I know, because it was on the TV, and the TV only spouts truth. So, therefore, it's true. You know what I mean? Oh, I read it at school. It's got to be true. And they start telling you. Now, sort of often you might get drawn into the argument for a while, but there's a moment when you realize that you just don't care because you know that they're wrong. You know. So what's the point? Do you know what's the point in going through this game? If you're a little bit unsure, you might get into an argument. This is why these guys just keep fighting, because they actually really don't have any idea what they're doing. They have no true knowledge. They have no gnosis inside of them, yeah? They have no real deep faith. So these guys just fight all the time because they actually don't have a good foundation. Their foundations are weak, yeah? These guys have never found the truth, so they're a bit messy, and these guys have never found the truth, so they just spend all their time fighting. Whereas if you've actually experienced it, you often don't talk to these guys at all. Yeah? As an example, like, I'm quite close to some people who are I'm close to a lot of Christians because my mum's a Christian, this sort of thing. And they've been all, you know, there's this whole Israel-Palestine thing that's going on, and I'm not going there. We're not going there tonight, all right? That's just not me. But they're Christians, and they have heavily sided with Israel in this whole thing. And they not only are doing that, but they've actually gone out and they're setting up tents, marquees at the local markets, the local mostly Muslim markets, yeah, and are trying to convert Muslims and spending all of their day showing them pictures of, you know, of horribly mutilated people of horrible things supposedly that Muslims have done, and telling, look, they've done this. And basically, I guess we already talked about it, and they were trying to say, so they had it coming, and I'm like, it doesn't seem very Christian, does it now, Mum? They had it coming. You know, well, you know, Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, well, it's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, a bit of a stretch. Didn't the Christ sort of condemn the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing? But anyway, so they're pushing, and they're spending all this time just arguing. And they go out at night times, a whole bunch of the boys. They call themselves the boys, but they're all 60s, so not quite the boys, is it? You know, it's a little bit older than the boys. Let's call them the blokes. You know, all the blokes go out. My stepfather and all that, and they go out at night and they get all their little pamphlets and they go out converting Muslims. You know, they sit on the street arguing with Muslims, and they're telling me, watch out, I might get stabbed. And I'm like, you know, I don't actually think they do that. I mean, I know Muslims are the new black, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think they do that. I think that's just a general fear. I don't think Muslims stab people because most Muslims I've talked to are pretty chill. You know what I mean? I mean, talking about it's just the Australian streets. Maybe you go into a gang, that's different. But it's the same thing. You walk into a bunch of bikies, he might have a cross on his back, but it's not why he's going to stab you, is it? It's not because he's a Muslim he's going to stab you. But anyway, the point is they spend all this time fighting and arguing, but really what it comes down to is it's a shaky foundation, man. It's a shaky foundation. It's because you're just a little bit not sure. Really deep down. If you had true, deep, intimate knowledge, you wouldn't do that. You just wouldn't care. I've been put in that position heaps of times. People start pushing about stuff. Oh, I just don't really care. As I said, it happens with my mum all the time. You know what I mean? She comes to tell me about everything. Okay, sure. You're going to convert me. Mum, I don't mean to be that guy, but I actually train people to teach Gnosis. I've well and truly bought the cow. I not only have bought the cow, I actually run a farm where I teach others to breed cows. Like, it's actually quite a high level here. You can't sell me veganism. It's just not going to work. I am literally a seller. I am a butcher who trains butchers. You will never convince me to be a vegan. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, you can't convince me to Christian. I'm well and truly going to your hell, if you understand. Oh, but we want you in heaven. Well, that's fine. Just lay off the kids. So, you know, that's fine. I let them make their own decisions. But so the point is, you know, so this is the intimate, this is sorrow. So if I want to get here, so what I'm trying to say is we do need a bit of belief, but we don't want to live in the intermediate mind. Gnosis shouldn't become another intermediate mind. I'm not bringing you here so you can go around telling everybody I'm a Gnostic now. Yeah. In fact, I actually know. I have an old friend of mine from years and years and years and years ago. We grew up together. And I found out recently he goes around telling everyone he's a Gnostic. But he's like never come to a class. Ever. You know, it's like when we were drunk as kids, I occasionally told him a few things about Kabbalah. And then he just gets high and tells everyone about that and tells everyone he's a Gnostic because he thinks it sounds great. And I'm like, you're not a Gnostic. You don't attend anything. But again, for him, it's like that. Gnosis has become part of the intermediate mind. There are a lot of people like this. If you go to South America, Gnosis is just here, man. There are Gnostic churches where people do runes and all this sort of stuff. They still go gambling and drinking, which is kind of generally against our ethos, but they do all this sort of stuff. But yeah, so Gnosis isn't just a new thing, a new belief to put in your mind. Gnosis is something that you have to experience. And so that's why we want to awaken this mind. That's why we teach meditation, because meditation is the bridge. Yeah, so I put practice here, meditation, so that I can actually gain results and experience it. When you get taught about the psychological work, it's to be applied. When I teach you how to die in the ego, I want you to apply it, not just accept it, but apply it and get your own results. So then it becomes something true inside of you. The same thing, try to go to the astral, do the practices. Gnosis is full of practices, full of esoteric exercises, many, many, many we can do. And all we have to do is apply them. Applying them will start to move us to the inner mind, yeah? Because as we said, that belief and that understanding will upgrade to faith, will become true gnosis, true knowledge, yeah? And so then, this means we can actually start to experience something of the unknown. You see, this is what I was trying to say, and I think we can pretty much finish here, is that in here, this is all just known, yeah? It's all subjective mind. It's all experiencing the known. The sensorial mind is the known. It's easy. It's like it's what I can hear. It's what I can hear, taste, touch, feel. It's really straightforward. And we can sort of agree on that. Everyone else can sort of come to the same point. Yeah, that's all I see. Yep, that's good. Okay, we're on the same point. Yeah. And when you start to bring the unknown to a person there, they actually often struggle. They don't want to know about the unknown. They're not interested in the unknown. It actually makes them a bit scared. It shakes the foundations of the concepts which have all been sort of rigidly put in place. And the same thing for the person who's done that. In a lot of ways, the intermediate mind is often just creating a fake unknown so that I can feel good about the unknown, which is pretty much, and nine times out of 10, most of what the intermediate mind is actually just creating a known about death. Most of the time. Yeah, Christianity, you go through a whole process so that when you die, you go to heaven. Yeah? Most of the pagan religions were exactly the same. We've been reading one, remember, about the original pagan religion of the Anglo-Saxon people in England. And it's the same thing. When I die, if I die heroically in battle, then I get to go to the great fields at the end of life. Yeah? And so what I've done is I've created a known out of the unknown. Do you see what I'm saying? Using a few small concepts of the unknown from somebody else, yeah? From the guy who went up and experienced the higher dimensions of nature, who had amazing esoteric experiences. I use that and I form a little known. And I go, yep, it's all really good. If I'm just a really good person, if I follow all the right structures and I do the right prayers, I say the right things for bed, then all good. I don't need to worry about the unknown. Yeah? Gnosis is actually about experiencing the unknown. We want to experience the unknown. That's the whole point. Yeah? We don't want to just, I don't want to find the best level of the known. Read all the books. There's the secret. It was the back of the book the whole time. I just had to turn the page upside down, origami it into three pieces, combine it with another book, and there's the truth. It was written there the whole time. I'm now enlightened. No. What you want to experience is the inner worlds. You want to experience the astral world. You want to experience what it's like when the consciousness actually extracts itself from the mind. That's what we call samadhi, or what the old Christians, or Gnostics, as their names, used to call the ecstasy. To experience the ecstasy. to actually, or the beta to actually be extracted, so that the consciousness comes out of the mind. Yeah, to experience. It's often called the void, which is actually a fullness, not an emptiness. It's empty, but what it's empty of is materialism, pain, and suffering. What it's full of is light. And we don't really know what light is until we experience it. This is not light. Yeah, this is faux light. I mean, this is LED. It's actually literally not light. It's like black light. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Right. But it's not light. Even the nicest fire, it's not real light. True light is in the internal worlds. If you've ever seen the sunrise in the astral, you know exactly what I mean. The astral light is immense. The power that it has within it is fantastic. It's not just a physical, there's like an experience that you see with your internal senses. It's something that moves you inside. And that's just the astral. The consciousness and the conscious experience in the void is 4 dimensions higher than that again. It's something immense. That's what all of these people were doing. These ancient, they're Zen Buddhists and these meditators were trying to actually take the consciousness out of the mind, completely remove it from the shell and experience the unknown for a moment. The Tibetan Buddhists understood that at the moment of death, you would experience the unknown. So they spent their whole life preparing for it. That's why the Tibetan Buddhists got a real death feeling about them, which is funny because they're really happy. They're quite jovial. Like you see the Dalai Lama is like, just laughs at him all the time. He's never laughing at someone, but it's like he's laughing at himself and everyone all the time. No one gets offended, even though he's laughing at you, which is usually like a, what, mate? Do you know, situation? So it's quite amazing. But all of their entire knowledge comes through the path of death. They spend their whole life preparing for the bardo of death, the moment in which there will be a gap between living and unliving. They want to experience the unknown. And that's what we want to experience. Unfortunately, I can't teach you the unknown. Anything that I have experienced of the unknown, the second I tell it to you, it becomes known. This is an awkward situation for us all. No matter what, I can tell you, I went to the void, I've done it twice. Extremely hard work, and it always happened when I was never expecting it. Do you know what I mean? But a fantastic experience nonetheless. And going to the void is beautiful because you then have an experience of the unknown. It's an incredible level of gnosis, incredible experience, because it's something that's real, completely real. But to tell it to you wouldn't really do much, would it? Do you know what I mean? Because it's a nice experience, but we need to experience it. We need to feel it. We need to enter into that reality. Same with the astral. You need to experience it for yourself. Same with the depths of meditation and the results of what a really powerful and profound meditation can do for you. All of these are things of the inner mind. Yeah? So the last moment here is to develop the inner mind. Samael says we need to develop the inner mind through imagination, inspiration, intuition. These are all done mostly through meditation. And what we do is we open the mind. The mind because the mind becomes really closed. Do you know what I mean? Like as I said, the mind nowadays, it just becomes so closed. It's like, remember I've said it so many times in the Truman Show when he says, I want to explore the world. I want to be an explorer. And she just pulls the map down and goes, too late, it's already been explored. Do you know what I mean? And I remember being a kid and there was still like a level of unknown. You know, people would say, there's parts in the jungle where no one's ever set foot. And you're like, wow. Whereas now it's like, every TikTok's just like, everything is already known. The whole world is obvious. Life is miserable. And it's just like, come on, man. Like everything the same. It's always the same thing, Sometimes, there are some about talking about the unknown. That's really nice. I like it when you see like beautiful stories about the unexplained, like these scientists who were amazing. Like, Nikola Tesla, a good example. People who were able to use the imagination properly. So the proper use of imagination, which is the only one we're really going to talk about, the proper use of imagination is actually the correct state of mind. So imaginative knowledge is when the mind is in a perfect state, meaning the mind is completely receptive. And that's how these guys, these amazing, what are they called? Inventors who actually invented something. Not the new guys that said putting Samsung tablets on fridges, but the original inventors. The guys who the Nikola Tesla who figured out that you could bounce a piece of electricity threw waves across the entire world and created the entire telephone and internet network. You know what I mean? Overnight, just through a simple thing. These guys, most of when you listen to what they're like, they were all the same. The same thing with Einstein's famous formula, sort of stuff. They all say the same thing. They dreamed it first, or saw it in a like when they were really like in a meditative state, when they were sitting in reflection, complete silence. It came to them, and then they worked backwards. They all say the same thing, that the knowledge was given to them, and then they worked backwards to understand it. Einstein says that. He said he saw it in his head, and then he saw the formula and was like, whoa, and then spent ages figuring out what it meant. The same thing, Tesla dreamed many of his inventions, and then he brought them into reality. You know, and these guys aren't taking like peyote and stuff. Please, that's not what these guys were doing. Yeah? These guys had a completely awakened mind. Yeah, receptive mind, completely receptive, so the consciousness could act beautifully. And obviously, it was their mission too, part of their being and their consciousness, to bring these things to humanity. That's why it's not just every single person, but they were having these experiences. But it's the same for us. If my mind is to become completely receptive, that's when true imagination comes. What I'm talking about, this whole, what's it called, Harry Potter, all this sort of stuff, and all these books, they're not really imagination. That's just fantasy. It's just, what it is it's what we call mechanical imagination, where you just take a whole bunch of stuff that's already in the mind and kind of put it together. If a person just makes a chair, and they just make it from their image of the chair they've already seen, as opposed to a person who makes something completely different that no one's ever seen. Do you understand what I mean? Because that person has imagination. And that's what I mean. Some of these books were. I would venture to say, for instance, as an example, that like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were some of the last true imaginative authors who wrote stories that were completely fresh and beautiful and simple and lovely. And to be fair, to not like the entire of the fantasy genre, the whole thing just comes from Tolkien. Every single time you think of an elf or a dwarf or someone dressed up weird or someone having some weird thing on the internet, that's all from that. The entire meme culture comes from making jokes about Lord of the Rings. All of that from one guy who actually had a properly developed imagination. And you know what's interesting about these guys? Yes, they were well studied in this, but you know what they spent most of their time doing? Sorry?
Meditating?
Close. Just walking around in nature. If you look up Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they spent most of the time just walking. These guys, they're like incredible intellect, unbelievably intelligent men. But they spend the most time just walking around, just going for nice walks, observing nature, enjoying and allowing all of the natural power of it to enter into them. And you'll see that too. The same thing about true inventors are almost always inspired by nature. Proper inventors, you'll see that. They'll say, oh, yeah, I saw the way the hummingbird did that. I thought maybe we could replicate that. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to new guys who are like, how can we make money? What if, and I'm just saying it, what if we took the Mars bar and instead of putting the price up, we just remove a quarter of the bar? That's imagination. He made millions. The guy's a true pioneer. We made 4 documentaries about him. There's amazing stuff. And on YouTube, there's 100. The real documentary, Mars. What was it really about? You know what I mean? All this sort of stuff. The documentary's called Life on Mars. And that's just mechanical crap. Do you know? And that's why our world's collapsing, because no one has real imagination anymore. The people making movies don't go and walk out in nature and enjoy things anymore. They sit around watching movies all day. So we're just watching the same rehashed crap. No one can make anything new or interesting or different or diverse because their minds are just completely full of rubbish and they can't actually experience the unknown. And that's why there's very little new things coming out anymore. And that's why if we want to experience it, we have to start to open this mind up ourselves. And so the beginning of that, meditation, beautiful. But we can also feed that mind too with good archetypes, as I'm mentioning this, lovely sort of classical music is a good example as well. I've talked about it in many classes. The impressions of high art have a way of talking to the consciousness as well. It starts to push the consciousness open a little bit, yeah? It's like the opposite usually. Like you see some of these, I'm not going to go, you see some works of art that are just truly horrible. Who did that? Like, why would you do that? I shouldn't say, but I remember my aunt. My aunt was like in the 80s. She was from the real cocaine era in the 80s. And I remember she used to go to one of her friends' place. It was an interesting place. Anyway, her friends, they had this big picture above. It was just like this someone had just thrown every color of dark red onto a canvas above the mantelpiece, and it was called The Abortion. I know, yeah. Why would you do that? Like, why? Can you imagine how you feel every time you walk past it? Do you know what I mean? Is that going to inspire this? No. How's imaginative knowledge going to move to inspired knowledge? How's inspired knowledge going to create intuitive knowledge? It's just not going to happen, because you're going to be so full of all these painful feelings, yeah, from someone else's mind, yeah. So this is what we want. We want to experience the unknown for ourselves. And the pathway to that is a dissolution of the ego, meditation, practices, exercises, working to actually open that mind up, and also do a little bit of what we call, we'll talk about that in the next lecture in Universal Mind, a little bit of actual, what we call mental hygiene, actually looking after my mind and not allowing so much nonsense into my mind. It sort of isn't really practiced nowadays. You know, people still try to get apps to do it. You know, you buy an app that stops you from using your phone. I just love that concept. You're on the phone. It's like, here, buy an app that's going to stop you using your phone. One of my even more favorite ones. There's one that's just like those little PayWave tap devices. Someone made one of those, and you tap it, and it just like shuts your phone down, and then you can't use it for a certain amount of time until the tap, unless you want to make an emergency call, I think. And I'm like, but why? You know, like, why would you do this? Yeah. Oh my god. You see, I saw a video about the guys, like the CEO of Apple, and someone said, oh, how do you feel about your phone? It's like, yeah, we actually have a no phones policy in my household. But you sell them. I said, yeah, you're not allowed to bring them into the house. You guys, it's too addictive. That's amazing. Which is, oh my god, we need to go back to the forest. I think every time when we stopped using fire, it was a problem. We should just be cooking our meat on the fire. It all was all downhill from there. Oh my god, just, you know, hardening a spear and throwing it at a deer. That was the way. That was the life. Yeah, or eating berries. I mean, it's up to you. I'm sorry. You have any questions? Yes, Zach.
I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on elementals. I didn't quite get the connection with the five senses and the elementals.
Okay.
I accept that they're real. And I once read an old Rosicrucian book, and the chapter was on the lower astral forces and their dangers. And it was about jinn, how a jinn can latch onto someone, and in fact whole families. And
yeah, in Gnosis we call those larvae.
I'm just quite confused about the whole thing.
Okay.
I wondered if you could just, without going too much.
No, that's a fair question. So the reason I mentioned it during the sensorial mind is because the skeptical movement has ruined our ability to see them. That's what I'm saying. The reason why people don't perceive them anymore is because the general skepticism has ruined that in the people. The people need to be a little bit open. This mind has to at least be able to have a little peep of something different. You know, the way everyone is nowadays is just like everything's being explored, evolution's it, and that's it. You know, and because of that, no one experiences anything. And if anyone ever experiences anything, they just sort of they clam up. You know, even though literally anyone who takes drugs, the second of just because the problem with taking drugs is it's like instead of opening the door, it's kind of like jimmying the door with a crowbar, and it never quite shuts properly afterwards, if you know what I mean. So if you like that, you'll experience something, but then afterwards you're going to be trying to shut the door, and it's always going to be problematic from then on in. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have to spend a lot of time repairing the door and the frame. I do that for a living. Anyway, both ways. Get the joke? I'm a handyman and I help people with drug problems. Anyway, let's not go there. So the point is, right, the elementals, right, They exist in, and as I said, people have seen these everywhere. I find it hilarious that Sherlock, the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, his other work that he wrote that's not so well known is called My Life with the Fairies, where he used to literally, because he was a Rosicrucian as well, and he used to invite his intelligent and elect intellectuals around and then sit them in his backyard and then make them stare at slightly moving branches and be like, there's an elemental there, keep watching and you'll see it. And eventually they'd see it and they'd just be like, and like never visit him again, because he'd freak them out. So what elementals are, there's a whole bunch of that, right? So elementals are the essence, just like we have an essence, right? Every animal, living thing has an essence, right? And so the all of the trees have an essence, all of the shrubbery, everything. And all of those living essences have an astral body. Yeah, an astral vital body as well. And that body is what we refer to as an elemental. So for instance, within the trees, you often have the air elementals, yeah, but they move. Just like when you have a gust of wind, there's often air elementals within the wind. We just don't see them anymore. We don't have that. We're so asleep consciously, we don't see any of that anymore.
So they're neither good nor bad. They're just
no,
both, or can be
no,
both.
no. They just live within things, you know. But then the stuff you're talking about with that Rosicrucian book, right? That's what we call larvae, and larvae is a little bit different. So when a person spends like a lot of time obsessing over something and sort of working negatively with something, what happens, like as an example, the guy spending hours and hours and hours watching porno at night in his room, right? What he creates is larvae. So all of the sort of energy around him starts to take a form. And when that form gets big enough, nature gives it sentience, meaning it actually then starts to move around. And what it wants is to recreate the same energy that created it. That's why you start to get like an energetic presence in certain places. So for instance, larvae is something negative, so it's always in places of disrepute. As you know what I mean. And so you start to feel that, and you can almost feel it on you. If you walk through one of those places, sometimes you just feel like heavy and there's stuff on you. And there's certain cleanses and things you can do to get rid of that. That's why you always burn frankincense before you come in here. It just cleans anything out of the environment. But there's levels of what you can do, certain practices to sort of remove larvae from yourself. There's more extreme larvae, like the incubus and succubus, that actually sort of try to push the person to have nocturnal emissions, can actually latch onto the body like that. That can happen. But also, in general, it's more like, it's sort of like, remember I talked about the mental sheath, right? This is our mind. Things like that can sort of get stuck in there. Larvae can sort of get stuck in you, and they just sort of fester if you're not careful. And then you start to sort of accept this, and then eventually it creates ego inside of you. Do you know what I mean? Because you start to take on the ego of that environment. But usually you would go for that sort of larvae if you already had the ego anyway. Do you know what I mean? The guy goes to the brothel because he wants to go to the brothel, you know what I mean? But that's how that sort of starts. So that's called larvae. It's a little bit different. You know what I mean? But as I said, these guys all gave it different names and stuff like that. So they use the word jinn. Jinn traditionally would more be like a fire elemental. Do you know what I mean? And from the more Muslim tradition, when they talk about the jinns, with the elementals of fire had a lot of power, very mystical. You can work with them, but every elemental, every tree, and like you can work with the elementals of plants. We do. For instance, we have our doors unlocked all the time, even my car door outside on the street with all my tools. I've never been robbed. I've had whole packs of teenagers just go straight past. I mean, it helps that my car has 500,000 Ks and literally looks like it's going to fall apart at any moment. But at the same time, no one ever comes in because I made a pact with four aloe vera elementals to protect our house. And if anyone ever comes near the house, there are thoughts that hit them that make them want to walk away. Those elementals send mental waves to the people, and if a guy walks in, he starts being like, I don't know about this one, Davo. Don't know about this one. You know what I mean? Maybe we should try the next house.
Do they want something from you in return eventually?
No, if you treat an element, it's like if you've ever worked with your plants. Your plants all have elementals. If you're emotional with your plants, they grow better. Do you know what I mean? As long as you have a good relationship with the elemental has a good relationship with you. That said, they're completely neutral. A person who knows how to work black magic can force the elemental to do things. And that's where you have all these stories, like the fantastic story of Bruce Lee, who was supposedly killed by the elemental of a lemon tree by the Yakuza because they didn't like him and they didn't like what he was doing and how he was sort of representing Asian people in the public. You know what I mean? They didn't like it. Plus, he was sort of, well, Hong Kong's Chinese and they were Japanese, didn't like it. But there's stories like that, you know. And so there's a whole world of white and black magic if you want to play games. But I suggest we just do some meditation and just sort of take it easy. And I can teach you elemental magic. I know heaps of elemental magic, and I use it. It's really good for healing. You can work with certain elementals, like as an example, the aloe vera, really good solar energy, because all of the plants come under different signs, and therefore they all have different humors, and you can work with them. So you're not only just like, see, this is the problem nowadays, like when you do like a juice cleanse or something like that, you know, you're getting some juice that was like, I don't know, harvested in, I don't know, Bali or something, and then it's sort of bottled and it comes this whole way here or whatever, right? Whereas if you're working with an elemental, it's like it's right there. Do you know what I mean? You work with it, then you actually have a relationship with the elemental, the living plant, and then you take some of the living plant, you ask for its help, and then you eat some of the living plant, and you're creating a relationship with the living plant. Yeah, it's different. It's different to how we are. You know what I mean? They're happy to give of themselves. They regenerate. It's different. Do you understand what I mean? But it's not like that whole contract obligation stuff. That's all demon magic stuff, and that's all black magic. And you can go there if you want, but it's a complete waste of time. Because in the end, all you do is create more karma and you go to the abyss anyway. That's what's going to happen. So every time that you look at the great aristocracy and greedy people of this world and you think, that's ridiculous, feel happy knowing that they're going to suffer in the abyss for thousands of years. So don't worry about it. There's nothing you could do in this lifetime that could possibly deal with the thousands of years of pain that they're going to deal with afterwards. That process, okay, I just opened a can of worms. That process is just the stripping away of the ego. The more ego you create, the longer you go through the process of having that stripped off you. That's how it works. So if you create a lot of ego now and you don't dissolve it now, you'll go through that process. That's why all of the religions talk about some sort of hell or inferno, but it's not a permanent damnation. It's just where nature strips the ego off for you. But the process is much slower. And those elementals are different. An elemental that's going through that. So when my essence goes eventually into the trees and everything like that, through the cycle of degeneration, when I'm finished, you know, I've done with my human lives, then those elementals can be like a little bit polarized negatively because they have the essence of a person who's slowly having the ego stripped off them. Like a pug dog. It's got an inferior elemental. That's karma, man. If you don't work on yourself now, you're going to be like 5 pug dogs. Do you know what I mean? And like some of those other animals that just look like they shouldn't live. There's all these animals, you see them and they're like, and you just think like, that's your life, mate. You don't work on yourself. You're going to be like that. Or just one of those trees that just looks like you're going to be an indoor plant for a person who doesn't know how to look after plants. Just a potato sitting in the cupboard, never getting used. So dry. Your feelers everywhere. And then finally go, just throw you in the bin. That's your future if you don't work on yourself, you know? An inferior elemental suffering through thousands of years until your ego is stripped. And then you know what happens? The ego gets all stripped off. And then you're a happy elemental. Then you go through the process of complication and bam, you're a little baby again. You're a little person again. And boom, what are you going to do? We'll just do it all again. Samsara. That's it. You do it again and again and again and again and again. It's all about the journey, man. But there's a point where you just think, I'm kind of over the journey. And that's when you awaken the inner mind. And then you can experience these things. You can actually leave that whole process. But you have to have this first. We have to start to awaken some consciousness. So the inner mind works with the awakening of consciousness. That's why I said it's the mind that... It is the objective mind, but just to be crystal clear, you have to awaken it. So it's not like you're just going to instantly become objective. It's going to take time. Yeah? All this stuff takes time. Gnosis is a work.
What happens when we die?
Oh, come on.
You can answer it.
That's a big question. We got 2 whole lectures on that. Okay, cool. So, short answer, we come back. Do you know what I mean? It depends on our karma. Yeah. If we have if we still have an allotted, there's a certain amount of lives, 108 lives, as Buddha says on his necklace. There's 108 lives of human existence, and then if we've reached the end of our human existences, then we'll go through the process of actually decomplication of energy. The essence will go through the whole animal, vegetable, mineral kingdom, and slowly all the ego is stripped off, and then we'll just go through it again. So we'll go back again, then mineral, vegetable, animal, recomplicated energy, and then we come out. No ego, first human life, no ego. And then we can create some more ego. And then we do it again. So if at the end of our life we still have lives, we come back. If not, we go through that process I just mentioned.
We get
If
stimulated?
Sorry?
Oh, have you heard that where people are saying don't go into the light? Let the
That? Yeah.
stimulation light?
No. So what? No. If you're conscious during the process of death, then you can. There's some level of being able to two things: being able to sort of change a little bit the life afterwards. So if you're awake during the process of your death, you can influence a little bit the next life, change the star sign, something like that, right? A little bit. You can be a little more conscious during that process and hopefully even bring those memories into the next life. The other one is, and this is actually really old teaching, it's in the back, Samael talks about it on the back of his books, but it's old Buddhist and it's in a few other teachings. Yeah. If you are completely and utterly defined to leave creation, in the moments of death, a person can, but it's extremely, unbelievably difficult. They said because you need to be able to, the Buddhists talk about it, they say you need to be able to withstand the feeling of wanting to be reborn, which means to reject every mother you've ever had emotionally. And there's a bunch of other things. There's another 4 things. And if you can do that, then you can leave creation, but you'll still be unrealized, meaning you'll go back to the absolute, the source of creation, but you'll go back as an unrealized being, as opposed to the person who completely awakens consciousness and goes through the whole process of creating the bodies and all this sort of thing, and then will actually go back properly. But that's a different path. I think someone says there's 7 paths back to the absolute, and they're all different. One is just keep going round and round and round and round and round, and then eventually you run out of it. They just send you back anyway. Yeah. The other one is the nirvanic path, which is where if you do good deeds, you can, in between each life, there's that little, what they call heaven or nirvana, and in between each life, there's a little repose where the ego gets left at the door and you get to be happy for a bit and then you come back again. And that's a life of sacrifice. So mostly the person is just doing good for humanity, but that takes a really long time. And then there's our way, the direct path that Samael gave us. And that's do it all in one lifetime and finish with it.
Are you saying the absolute?
That's the Christ though.
The absolute meaning the void, is that the same thing?
No, not at all. I'll show you. The void's here. Yeah? Technically, actually, it's there. But the void's about there. See the line? Absolute's a little white bit right at the top. Except it's more like the whole wall. And everything else is small inside of it. In this picture, it looks tiny. See that? That's there. All the way up there. But it's actually the whole of reality, and we live in this tiny little heavy speck of it. So technically speaking, the Kabbalah should look like this. And we're in there, we're the dot. And this is the absolute out here. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah. The absolute's the real world, the reality, the truth. Uncreated light, life free in its movement, complete activity and repose. But that's the being of the being. So we have our own interior God, and then that's the great ocean of life, and our being is like a drop of water from that. Do you understand what I mean? That comes into creation. All of creation exists within. That's Kabbalah. That's getting pretty complicated. I definitely can't explain it in the last 15 minutes or so. But we'll get there. We'll get there on that one. Is that enough?
Yes, that's enough.
Okay. But no, the absolute's something completely different. It's that's the goal at the end of the life or lives. Yeah. The void is something you experience right now.
But nevertheless, you're saying that it is
it's the goal.
Theoretically possible to go straight there.
Yes. Yes, in one lifetime. At the end of our life to go there, to be finished with this. This is it here. This is our little roadmap. Yeah? This is what we call the beginning of the path. It's called the probationary path. Some people can even do this before Gnosis. The awakening Kundalini, creation of the soul, Incarnation of the Christ, resurrection of the Christ, the ascension. That's going back to the absolute. At the end of creation, meaning that you will reach that point and all of your bodies will revert to a few atoms and go back into the absolute, back into the great ocean of life. And the absolute, or what we call agnostos theos, God unknown unto himself, right? The absolute will become more through our own understanding. In other words, everything that we have experienced and will be reduced to just a few atoms. That's 10 atoms. Will be reduced, and that will go back into the absolute, and the absolute will come to know himself being him. Obviously not itself. Itself, I don't like using that word here. The absolute will come to know itself through the experience of the beings of creation. So our experience will feed the absolute. But we will go back as a realized being. And as many, many people say, Adi Buddha, which is the term they use in Buddhism for the absolute, Adi Buddha, negative Buddha, pre-Buddha, Adi Buddha is just the beginning. That's what they all say. I mean, I have no idea. You can't really experience the absolute in creation, so I don't know. I experience the void, but it's nowhere near it. The void just getting outside the mind. You know what I mean? Like, it's better than it. It's better. You know, I'll be honest with you. The void is even better than like perfect weather on a Sunday. Perfect. Like, I mean, like, you know, like when it's just like that perfect. The breeze is just perfect. There's that nice, you know, you can see it in the leaves moving, and the sun is nice. Doesn't burn at all. Just feels warm. It's like gentle on your skin and just perfect, you know. And you go up there and you go for a nice walk. The void's miles of times better than that. It's wonderful. You just feel so happy, so free. Yeah, because you're no longer shackled by your mind. So, yeah. Good?
Yeah, that was really good.
Happy? Oh, that's good. I'm glad we're happy. Okay. Meditation time.